Welcome into Beyond Sunday. I am your host, Luke, and I'm joined by Ryan Parquette. Ryan taught this past weekend here at the Ocala campus, so we've had a few-week break.
Yeah.
Actually, since we've done the podcast. We figured everybody's running crazy.
What happened?
Staff's running crazy. People are running crazy, doing Christmas shopping, all that. And so we took a couple weeks off. And so I'm excited to be back in the host chair this week and talk with Ryan about it because, I mean, we have to talk about the Christmas services because we had what we are saying is kind of our highest attended Christmas or any weekend that we've had at the Springs across services in a weekend. So, and that's including Easter's, I believe, right? Like Easter, Christmas, previous years. So awesome, which typically will correlate to salvations and people that want to get involved. And so that number, I think that's something that I love is hearing when I can't remember who it was, but it's pretty much, we count numbers because every person is a life. Yeah. Every number is a person. Yeah, every person has a story. And so just super powerful weekend across all of our campuses. We obviously Ocala, Southwest, Lady Lake, and Middleton. Middleton had a cool opportunity as well to do their downtown service for Christmas Eve, and had a crazy number, over 1,800. They prepared and had seats for 15, and still had people standing and all of that. But nothing but great things were said about the Springs Christmas services as a whole. It was fun. It was interactive. It snowed a couple times. Yeah. And we met a lot of new people. So it was awesome. But we are glad to be back with you guys now in the new year. So happy New Year to you guys listening. And speaking of New Year's, you kicked off your message with a bang. You start out talking, and if you are listening or watching this, you probably have seen the message or were here for it. But ultimately, you were saying that, gym memberships, everything like that you start as a New Year's resolution, most of those things die. They die because you're trying to do all these new things, and ultimately the way that we work is if one thing fails, then we kind of step away from everything. Yeah, we're like, well,
abandon
2026. That's my year.
Yeah, we tried.
Yeah, and
good effort.
You made a point talking about like Planet Fitness, being the sponsor for
10 years. I had to look it up. My wife was like, "Did you realize that Planet Fitness has sponsored the ball drop?" And I was like, no way. And yeah, for literally 10 years, they've paid for it.
And here's the thing, because listen, I have gone through the New Year's resolutions time after time. And a lot of the time in the last 7 to 8 years, it's been, I'm going to get in the gym again. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to do it. The amount of times I have started a Planet Fitness membership and it just didn't happen. But my one gripe is over. In Florida, at least, they now have a click to cancel your membership button.
No way.
Yeah, starting this year, it's like that's the law.
Dude, I've just got to be real here. Sorry, Planet Fitness. Worst gym to try to cancel. You have to go to the physical. If you move, you're cooked.
Yeah. Well, and you have to, and that's the case with a lot of gyms in general. Is you have to go to cancel. I know this from personal experience. You have to go to cancel, but now you can just click of a button. You're not able to do it? That's fine. Just cancel online.
Yeah, when we moved, we went and we're like, hey, we need to cancel our membership. And they were like, why? We're like, well, we live in a different state. And they're like, oh, well, you're going to have to come here to do that.
Yeah.
But we live in a different state. Like, I don't know how to do that.
So the important question becomes, Ryan, New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
Were you just saying that from the stage just because it was a funny point to be made, or you actually just wholeheartedly disagree with New Year's resolutions?
All right. Yeah. I think part of it was just to be, fun.
Right.
But part of me is like, why wait? If you want to be better,
right,
don't wait till next year. Especially you failed on your New Year's resolution. 80% of us will by February.
Right.
Like, try again in February. And I get the sentiment of like, okay,
right,
it's a new year. But I don't know. I guess I'm just weird.
I think that there's plenty of people who agree, and I agree, but I also think it is a good excuse to start something that you've been wanting to.
Yeah.
I saw a meme that said something to the effect of, or my wife did, saw a meme that said something to the effect of, I'm going to become a totally different person in 7 days exactly, not a day sooner. And it was like a week before the new year. But it's true. We often just wait.
Yeah.
And so my wife and I tried to start some of these things we knew we wanted to do in 2025 a little bit sooner. And I thought, so you don't have any resolutions this year?
I do, actually.
Oh,
I do
this is an
have.
interesting development.
Yeah, curveball. I know. Not to be like spiritual, but
on a
spiritual
church podcast?
Yeah, look at me.
Yeah.
No, my big resolution for the year is actually goes great with this message because I'm kind of talking to myself. But to live a significantly less busy life, and be like everything I'm hearing. I'm listening to leadership podcasts and reading stuff, and it's just over and over and over again. And this is usually in my life when this happens is like God's telling me, hey, like this is, you need to do this. But everyone is saying do less.
Yeah.
And I just felt in my life, I was doing way, way too much.
Yeah.
So that's my, resolution.
So I'm throwing a lot of things at the wall this year.
Okay.
And we're just gonna, we're gonna hope that I can bat like, 75 to 80% here.
I believe in you, man.
Yeah, there's 4 of them.
Okay.
3, and then an add-on that's just more fun for me type of thing. So one thing is read the Bible in a year.
Okay.
Cover to cover in a year. I have found on the Bible app a study that I'm doing that is for the year.
Are you still in it?
I am.
Oh,
I am.
All right.
January 7th, we're still here.
Yeah, look at us.
So it's it's a cool setup. So it's essentially, and I'm not familiar with a lot of the other ones what they do. Like I'm not sure what the Bible recap does and how they do it, but this one is essentially it's a psalm or a proverb every day, a chapter.
Yeah.
And it's something from the New Testament, something from the Old Testament.
Cool.
But you read it basically in the order.
Like it's still chronological.
Yeah. So it's like I'm starting in Genesis and then in the new, and then you start Matthew.
Yeah.
Or in the old, and then the new is Matthew, and then right now I'm in Psalm.
Okay.
So it's been good. And then they have a devotional that goes with it.
That's awesome.
So that I have a weight goal as well, as does everybody else in the country. So we don't need to talk about that anyway. Stick to a financial budget every week for all of 2025.
Okay.
So obviously we're not going to bat 1,000 on this. There's going to be things that come up, whatever. We know that.
Yeah.
But sticking to the budget. And then also, here's my fun one. Once I got married and I found out about the Instant Pot, I started to cook.
Okay.
And
this is a real curveball.
I started to cook. And then I ventured into basically using whatever to cook in the kitchen, not just the Instant Pot, whatever.
Okay.
So my New Year's resolution is to cook without a recipe once a week.
Okay.
So just whatever's in the kitchen, I make something, and it's more of a creation than just following a recipe. So that's my fun one.
That's so funny because the Instant Pot, it scares me, and I love cooking.
Really?
Yeah, I just for some reason I think it's just gonna blow up.
It is when it pressurizes.
Yeah, you pull that thing out and just and like that is a bomb.
Yeah, you quick release the pressure and it shoots up.
Yeah, so scary.
And I love it because it's simple. It's like you just put everything in there. There's so many recipes out there. That's how I started. That's how I learned.
Okay.
But I'm a huge believer in the Instant Pot because it jump started me even knowing, like not being intimidated anymore by cooking. So yeah, and then you venture into obviously using like a cast iron, an oven, whatever.
You literally dove in the deep end. You're like, you know what? How bad could it be? Let's do all the other stuff.
And I also love it because you can cook meat from frozen.
Yeah,
and it cooks it all the way through. Meanwhile, with the oven and the cast iron, you got to keep checking it. Yep. You go longer, whatever. Anyway, you guys don't care too much about this. But yes, cook without a recipe once per week. Was my fun resolution for the year. That's just being an adult all in one. That's my fun one.
Yeah.
Now I wanted to talk about, you talked about the story of Levi this week and tied everything into kind of leaving things behind.
Yeah.
And Levi being the tax collector, leaving things behind. But there's some cool things in the story, but maybe first, if you could just if you had to describe your message in a sentence or two, what's the, if someone asked you, what would you say is the message for this past week?
Yeah, Jesus, when he calls us to him, to himself, is always from something. There's not a single situation in scripture where Jesus does not call someone to follow him and just lets them remain where they are.
Yeah.
Like even just the physical act of following him means they're going somewhere, but like calling people out of sin. Because I mean, we talk about this story and Jesus goes and sits with the sinners and the tax collectors to call them to repentance, which is the act of leaving something behind and acknowledging the wrongs. And so there's not a single time where that happens.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the heart of like, what is God calling us to leave behind as a church, as an individual, and you know, the things that I'm valuing in my life.
Yeah. And like you said, Jesus came to him. Like it was a call from Jesus to Levi. And as some people might not know this, but Levi is then Matthew.
Yeah.
And so we know the Gospel of Matthew. It's like you said in the message, it's that Matthew.
Yeah.
So we obviously knew from the beginning that Jesus had and God had written the story already for him.
Right.
But that first step had to be made, and Jesus made the step.
Yeah.
And in reading, to get more context, the right before that happens is the healing of the paralytic.
Yeah.
Where the man gets dropped down through the roof by his friends, and Jesus forgives his sins, tells him to pick up his mat and walk.
Yeah.
And right after that, it says that Jesus went out to the shore and saw Levi as he was being followed by this mob of people who just wanted a glimpse, a taste, and to hear him. And I thought it was so powerful that Jesus didn't just pick someone from the crowd, because he can do anything.
Right.
The miracles that he can do are boundless. And so he could have just picked someone from there.
Yeah.
But he goes on to pick Levi. He walked away from the countless amount of people that were stuffed into this house and outside of it to then find Levi and tell him to follow him.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's just like I think it's a good example of you can't stop God's plan, like what he wants to do. It didn't matter where Levi was, Jesus was going to find him. And so he goes from this crazy healing to doing something just as miraculous.
Right.
Where Levi leaves everything.
Yeah. And well, when you're talking about that story of, again, the healing, it's like this miraculous sign. But the significant thing is, again, he says he forgives them of their sins, and that immediately causes issues. But then going to Matthew or Levi, he is literally in the circumstances of his sin, right? He is literally taxing people in this moment, right? So this is the problem. He's at the heart of the issue, and Jesus meets him there in the midst of that sin, and then calls him to follow him. And I made, the reference, like, people are not wanting to make eye contact with this guy because he's a tax collector. Like there's gonna be the whole, like, you have betrayed us aspect, but also a part of me is like, you make eye contact, he's gonna be like, pay up. And so, like, literally this person is ostracized in all of what they do, and he's in the midst of it. And that is exactly where Jesus goes to him.
Yeah.
And his response is just, a part of me thinks his response is so quick because he has heard the story of Jesus forgiving that man of his sins.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was just, and also to give further context to tax collectors, and that essentially they were looked at this way because of their dealings with, if you were a tax collector, you were taking money from, you were a Jew, typically taking money from your people, other Jews, on behalf of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, and you're literally funding their military, which is oppression.
Right.
You're funding the upkeep of their temples, which are foreign gods, and the emperor at that time was considered divine. So you're also, like, that is like peak form of idolatry to a Jewish person. So you are giving, you're forcing all of that on people.
Safe to say Levi made that career choice for money.
Yeah.
Which is what most of them did.
Yeah.
Correct?
Oh, yeah.
You just completely, like, ostracize yourself from your people to go do this, which makes this even more powerful because it's like Levi already made a choice that was huge, significant. I'm leaving. I'm going to ostracize myself
Yeah.
so that I can make more money and live a better life. And then when Jesus comes along, ironically or unironically, one of his people being a Jew.
Yeah.
And it's like he drops everything for the people that he betrayed.
Yeah.
Which is super powerful, but also just speaks to the power that Jesus has and the stories of Jesus that would make someone like Levi say, I'm gonna follow you.
Right. And yeah, you touching on that, it's literally like Levi through his decision making and his we can only presume it's probably a love of money, has separated himself from the rest of his community.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because Jesus in his actions calls him back into it, so that like he is brought back in and his actions are no longer like the barrier. But I made the point on Sunday, like Matthew is the bridge to the New Testament.
Yeah.
There's a reason why when they were composing it, Matthew was the first book, because it's the bridge to like the Jewish perspective of that. Yeah, Jesus is the king. He's the one we've been looking for.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to gloss over the context of these stories.
Yeah.
Where it's like, cool, yeah, Jesus invited someone who was a tax collector, had a good life, and to follow him. But so often we don't take into respect the fact that, like we said, talking about him turning kind of on the Jews, on his own people to do this. And it just makes you think, like, if we were in that moment, are we going to be like the scribes and the Pharisees who asked the disciples, hey, why is he, because after he calls Levi, they, have their dinner where tax collectors are there and Pharisees are around and scribes and everything. And it's like, why are they meeting with, like, why would he even associate with these tax collectors? And if you think about it in the moment, like the Jewish people, like obviously they have a loathing for tax collectors. Like, you take my money and you use it to oppress us.
Yeah.
And yet Jesus still says that, like, I am for the sick. Like, and so he goes on and says essentially that those who are healthy don't need a physician, but those who are sick do.
Right.
And he's talking about that, and it's like, if you put yourself in the shoes of the Jews, it's like, logically, where would we fall in this? We'd probably be right there with them.
Right.
Like, why is he wasting time on them? Selfishly, probably thinking, why isn't he talking to me?
Yeah, and that's like the power of Jesus. What he does, it's like what God does. He goes to the outsider. Like, if we were to compose a discipleship team, like these are my disciples, we would probably ask these like certain questions on like, do they know their scripture well? Are they on fire? All these things. And for like in this situation, Jesus just knows this person's heart and he calls them. Yeah. And I said that he's probably on paper the worst one. But that's how God works. And that's what the beauty of it, of God using what the things that we would not look at and think this is going to be great, to actually like show his glory. Using that is so much more powerful, because only through Jesus could Levi be who he was. Yeah. Right. Like, it's the only possible explanation for the Gospel of Matthew is because of this miraculous calling from Jesus that only he could have done. Is nothing other than God's glory and ability to do this thing through him.
Yeah. And if you take another step back and you look at it from the year 2025, as we're reading our Bible, a lot of people just know Matthew. They don't necessarily think you might separate the stories, or maybe you just knew him as Levi as the tax collector and you didn't think much past it. Yeah. But the power in that to step back and say, that tax collector that everybody was so sure was not the person to talk to is the one who has a gospel. Yeah. One of the most important books of the Bible. Yes. That tells the good news of Jesus. Like, that he was picked, handpicked by Jesus to do that. So to step back and look at that and see that he was chosen to do that, regardless of what he did. Yeah. And who he wronged. Because we know that's the case. He wronged probably a lot of people.
Well, and that's, to me, I took a class on like all these different arguments for God, and I loved it. Like they were like philosophy, like there was historical lessons, things like that. And we were getting towards the end of the class, and this professor is just such a wise dude, older gentleman. And he's like, all right, I'm getting ready to tell you, it's like the last day, what the best argument for the existence of God and his miracles is. And I'm thinking like, finally, right? Like, this is what I've been waiting for. Yeah. Even though we've had great stuff.
Right.
And he goes, it is in the ordinary miracles that happen to people when they meet Jesus. It's the alcoholic who is no longer an alcoholic. That is the greatest argument for God and his miraculous abilities. And so when I think about, again, Levi, Matthew, the people that Jesus is calling into a faith in him, to trust him and to follow him, that's the only explanation. Like, you think about Paul, he was opposed. He was persecuting them at violence, with violence. And for him to flip like that, what other explanation is there? Right. Other than like God's miraculous intervention in his life. And so it's not as, philosophical, but that is to me the miraculous. And that's the good news. It's like the people who are the most down and out, that are overlooked, God is looking at with adoration and love and purpose.
Yeah. And there's not many people, if any. If you have a spouse, maybe this is the exception.
Yeah.
There's not many people on earth that a normal, logical human would stop doing a few of the things that make them who they are to follow, or not just to follow, but to love someone else.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to stop this for you, right? We know of spouses that things that get broken, like addictions and things like that. But the fact that Jesus, who isn't a spouse, who doesn't have like that, to the outside world, doesn't have the power for you to change.
Yeah.
For Levi, for Matthew to do this and to leave everything, it goes into really what your big point was near the end of just leaving behind things, subtracting things from your life to follow Jesus. And we talk about resolutions, and normally that's adding things.
Yeah.
But you've got to subtract things in order to add. Like, you're only 24 hours in a day.
Right.
You're gonna naturally, take things out, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
To replace it.
Yeah, and I mean, the heart of like how that came up. Again, what I alluded to earlier was just like in my own life, this steady realization that Americans, or at least I say Americans, I don't know, but like people that I know and I experience life with, whenever I talk to them, they always tell me how busy they are. I always feel I'm constantly so busy. My life is just full of stuff all the time. And then when I think about that in the context of pursuing Jesus, what I realized was busyness isn't a spiritual virtue at all. Right. Not once in the New Testament, not once in Scripture is there. It's like, be busy. And so I realized like we get caught into this mentality of just constantly piling more and more into our lives, and it distracts us from being in his presence. And so like this came out of personally what I felt I needed to be called out of, which was like a lack of trust and a lack of coordinating my life around God, and just succumbing to the busyness of daily, weekly rhythms that we all get caught into. Yeah. And again, the tiredness, maybe this is out of like Christmas, I don't know, but like just the spiritual being tired, and realizing like, dude, because I read my Bible, I take classes on God. Like I in my mind, it's like I'm doing these things, but what I'm realizing is I've just filled my life up to the brink. And in this season, busyness is actually becoming kind of a burden and a distraction from him.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and so, that's what that leaving behind, I think that like, I think about families and all the things we navigate. We want kids to be successful. We fill their lives up. The students that I interact with, every time I talk to them, they are so busy. And it's like, you're in high school. Right. Dude, when I was in high school, I would spend hours just staring at the wall listening to music. Do kids do that? I don't know. They have phones now, but like everyone just feels...
They're scrolling while they listen to music.
They scroll. And so I'm just realizing this is like a real problem for everyone.
Yes.
And so maybe this year, it's not what things I need to add to my life to be more fulfilled and to be more Christ-like. Maybe it's actually the opposite of I need to take away a lot, and even some of them being good things.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's even just like, even if it's out of good intentionality, which is what you're saying, where, for example, if you've got a coffee meeting, right? I'm going to go get coffee with this person. I'm networking. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I've got that at 8. So I'm going to maybe skip my Bible today. I'm going to sleep a little more, and then I'm going to go do that so I can be prepared for this. And then tomorrow I'll be back at it with the Bible or whatever it might look, or in next week, when who knows how much it gets pushed back.
Yeah.
But I think that when you think, when people hear, we need to subtract things, we need to stop doing certain things, we think of negative.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like sleep, like God rested, right? God creates the entire world and he rests.
Yes.
And there's the Sabbath. Like everything is documented in the Bible as far as we should rest. Take some time. So like sleep really isn't inherently bad.
Right.
But it can be abused. And it's like maybe just wake up a little earlier, which means you got to go to bed a little earlier. And I'm preaching to myself here.
Yeah.
Because that's hard.
Yeah.
And we value our sleep.
Yeah.
But it's like, how much better would your day go if you set the tone with the Bible? And it's the same as like working out, as far as like once you do it, you're like, man, I feel so much more prepared for the day. I feel like I'm just at ease. Like when you work out, like my body feels good. When you read the Bible and you pray, maybe you do like a prayer journal, it's like I just feel energized by the Bible and by God. And so, yeah, it's not necessarily subtracting crazy things.
No. And like, again, like a lot of the times, this is the problem. A lot of it's like good things. And like a personal example, again, let's go to students. I see all the time students get pulled out of church because of sports. And sports are awesome. I love sports.
Right.
Like go Broncos. Like, but like I see it all the time. And so when we live that, like we have to understand, like, is sports worth sacrificing for my student to be in a relationship with Jesus?
Right.
Because what we've communicated is it isn't. When we pull them out of church.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be just like overly convicting here, but another side of the busyness thing is like when we say God rested on the 7th day, why do we think we don't have to do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like God did it.
Right.
So like if he literally has no limits.
Right.
And yet
he gives almost like it was an example.
Yeah. Weird.
He didn't need to.
Yeah, exactly.
But he did because he knew we'd be reading about it one day.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, absolutely. So it's simple.
Yes.
These subtractions, whether it's, sleep or video games at night, taking that away.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't watch the end of that football game.
Oh.
That's a tough one.
Woo,
That West Coast basketball game for any NBA watchers, or that TV show that you're binge watching. So yeah, a lot of really cool practicalities that we could take from your message. So I appreciated it. I know a lot of other people appreciated it. You had a great illustration as well. For those that were there, know what we're talking about. And if you didn't, you guys can go to our YouTube if you're not already watching, and find Ryan's message there. It's the most recent message we posted. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Happy New Year once again, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya.